In tonight's Technology Insider, the diagnosis for delivery drones in D.C. Some consumers are eager for the day when they can log on to a retailer's website, order something, and have it dropped off via drone a short time later. How close are consumers to that instant gratification? For answers, I'm joined by Brian Fung, technology reporter at The Washington Post. Brian, before we get into the regulatory aspects of this, give us an update on the technology itself. How close are we to drone delivery?
Well, the technology is still a little ways off. Companies are still working on fine-tuning the technology that lets drones sense and avoid each other. Folks in the drone industry say all the components that they need essentially to create a working drone delivery service are on the table. But right now, a lot of the, beyond the technical challenges, you also have, as you alluded to, issues dealing with regulation that need to be sorted out.
Now, integrating these delivery drones into U.S. airspace is also complicated, especially in Washington. How does the no-fly zone impact this effort?
Well, Washington is kind of unique in this series of circumstances in that, unlike many other cities in the country and indeed in the world, the nation's capital is covered by a no-fly zone that covers manned and unmanned aircraft. So meaning that you can't fly an aircraft, unless you've been pre-approved or are running a certain route, within 30 miles of the nation's capital. And that limit was recently reduced for unmanned vehicles to 15 miles radius within the nation's capital or from the nation's capital. But in general, folks within the industry say this is a big problem if we're trying to get drone deliveries started up in Washington, D.C.
Now, what role does geofencing play in this discussion, and can you get the manufacturers like DJI to cooperate and build that into their units?
Well, in some cases they already have. DJI is a great example. After the drone crashed on the White House lawn, recently, the company decided to implement its own geofencing protocols for Washington. And as technology improves, you can imagine geofencing becoming active for specific buildings or for specific areas like the National Mall. But at this point, the federal government is still sort of sticking to its no-fly zone, which kind of covers the Washington area on a blanket basis.
Now, Brian, you're also following a somewhat stunning admission from Netflix. Last week, they admitted to slowing down video streams for customers watching on the Verizon and AT&T cellular networks. What's going on?
Yeah, well, so what makes this interesting is that Netflix has been very active in Washington trying to encourage lawmakers and policymakers to intervene on its behalf on things like net neutrality, where rules have been set up to prevent internet providers from slowing down services and content that goes to consumers' devices like your smartphone or your tablet. What's interesting here is that Netflix is saying, we actually do the same kind of tactic in order to make sure that consumers don't accidentally blow through their data caps and thereby making it harder for them to watch more Netflix. So this is a case of, while it's not a complete apples to apples comparison here, it is interesting to see Netflix, reserving some of the same tactics that it was calling out for ISPs just months ago.
So what is the latest with net neutrality? I know we've talked about it a lot in the past. It's still around?
Yeah, we're still looking at a court decision that could come down at any time. Folks appear to be sort of bracing for that decision to come down. The FCC could have its rules completely overturned, could have them partially overturned, or it could be they could be upheld entirely. And most people seem to think it's going to be a mix of the middle option, with parts of the rules being overturned and parts of them being upheld, at which point the FCC would have an opportunity to go back to the drawing board and rewrite them in ways that satisfy the court.
We'll stay on top of it. In the meantime, Brian Fung, technology reporter at The Washington Post. Thanks, Brian.
My pleasure.